So, and action. Okay. Now, welcome back everybody to Hooke Court and to our Celtic experience. Now, I will say right now that as I'm speaking to you, there is a small group of children who are being extremely industrious, very, very close to me, in fact. And some of them are sampling some of the weaving techniques, and we've also got a small group who are grinding some of the corn in order for us to continue baking our bread, one of our staples that we have been trying to perfect. Now, what I will say is that yesterday our bread baking wasn't particularly successful, and we tried just to make bread inside an actual pan, inside a cast iron pan, hoping it was going to be like a little mini oven. But unfortunately, all that we were successful in doing was burning the bottom of the bread and making the top hot, sticky and doughy. So although that would have been quite nice if it was sweet as bread, it wasn't wholly successful. And so the other half of the group of children that are with us today, and this is a school from Bradstock, are actually outside as we speak, hopefully putting the final touches to our bread oven, which is the next thing that we're going to be trying to use in order to perfect our bread baking. So they're going to be putting clay over the actual tiles that we've got inside that we put together yesterday and this morning. They're now covering it in clay, and tomorrow we'll light the fire inside and see whether we can dry out the clay and create enough heat inside it in order to bake our own bread. That is also dependent on whether the other half from Bradstock here are able to grind us enough flour. Now, just before I go on a little bit further, this, for those of you who were watching yesterday, is all that's left of our deer bones. So these are the bones from the venison that we butchered yesterday. Now, it does look a little ropey, as in our butchering techniques weren't fantastically correct, but given that we were using the flint tools, I think we managed to strip away most of the useful meat. Now, some of that meat we've got cooking in a pot, which is in the stock that came from all of these parts. So, but what we're going to do with this later on is we're going to strip any of the remaining meat from these bones now they've been cooked, and that will go back into the pot that we've got on the heat outside, with also the front leg from the deer. So tonight we again should have a nice wholesome meal of pottage and venison. Now, one of yesterday's challenges was about trying to dye some of the wool that we've got here in a gargantuan pile next door to me. And we had some suggestions of some of the natural materials that we could use to dye that wool with. And outside right now we've got a small group of children who are washing the wool in a barrel outside, and hopefully once that wool's been washed and the lanolin has been removed from the wool, then we're going to take that wool and we're going to put it into a big vat of hot water that we've been preparing on the fire outside with one of these two dyes, one of the two dyes. So we've got the dandelion root here, and to be honest with you, it just very much looks like a brown sort of liquid that is sloshing around in there with the dandelion root. Or we've got the beet, which is a very, very deep red colour. So we'll choose later on which one of those two dyes we're going to sample with our actual wool. And hopefully by the time the school that are here from Bradstock leave, we should have some sort of the dyeing going on in the wool. Now, we've also got a suggestion here of how we can make some sort of soap, because it was mentioned earlier that Richard was starting to pong just a little bit, and a suggestion was that we used animal fat and that we also used ash. So I've got both animal fat here that we rendered, that we took down and was rendered from the bones here. So what I've got is some thick pieces of animal fat. Actually smells quite pleasant. It's quite hard, but a bit greasy and a bit oily. And also some ash that came from the fire. Now, as far as I understand it, I'm supposed to mix the two together, and there should be some sort of acid and alkali reaction that is going to create a sort of soapy-like reaction or substance. So if I take a couple of pieces of this fat, now apart from it being actually quite greasy and fatty, it doesn't feel too bad. If I take some of this ash mixed in, ooh, there's certainly something happening. I think I'm just making wet ash. Although it's probably very good for my skin. So, no bubbles as such, but ooh, very grey hands that do feel quite clean, although they do smell quite meaty. But there's lots of little gritty bits in the ash itself that's mixed in with the fat that's lubricated it. Does make it feel as if it's a sort of almost like a mud mask that you might put onto your face to remove sort of hard skin. But I'm not sure now how I get this off my hand. So I'm guessing it's just going to be a case of getting myself a bucket of cold water and seeing if I can then rinse this away. So just in response to Hillview School, who have asked about whether we've seen any mice or any rats yet, I was convinced last night at about 12:30 that there was something that was moving very close to me. I'm not sure if it's a mouse or a rat, but then shortly after that there was the most frightening snort that came from Alan, who was sleeping close by. And once he started snoring, there was no way that anything wild was going to be anywhere near us here in the house. So Alan's snoring, I think, was quite successful at making sure that there were no mice and that there were no rats. But there are, at the moment, increasingly, as we are becoming more adept at collecting and preparing the foods, there are more foodstuffs around, so it is something that we are now going to be worrying about. Now, the last thing I wanted to say before I went to see if I could clean off my hands was the ways in which you can contact us. And I don't know what they are. Now, I could, of course, go to my pocket, and you could, of course, use Facebook. Facebook.com/Hooke Court. Hashtag Hooke Court on Twitter. See, that's what happens when you get a non-professional to do a professional's job. So, obviously, any other questions that you might have or anything that you want to know about us living here at Hooke Court, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us in those ways that I've just clearly defined to you. We look forward to hearing from you. So, for now, goodbye, and we'll speak to you later.